You are listening to Repetitions with Daisy and Jack. Today we are giving you real, science-backed research with zero ads for supplements. On today's episode, we are breaking down exactly how much caffeine a 180-pound lifter should take and why timing it 8 to 10 hours before bed is the sweet spot for performance without wrecking your sleep. Pre-workout megadosing. 400 milligrams a scoop, some guys running 2. The whole culture is built on the idea that more caffeine means more output. The data says otherwise.
The ISSN position stand is unambiguous on this. 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. That's the window. Above it, the performance curve doesn't climb. It just accumulates side effects and starts costing you sleep.
So for a 180-pound guy, we're talking 250 to about 490 milligrams. Most single-scoop pre-workouts land somewhere in that range. The problem is the guys who think one scoop stopped working and went to 2.
That's the tolerance trap. And it's worth separating what tolerance actually means here. The ISSN acknowledges that chronic caffeine users see some attenuation of the ergogenic effect. What it does not say is that the effect disappears. You still outperform your uncaffeinated baseline. You're just chasing a ceiling that doesn't move.
I did exactly that. Spent about a year running somewhere around 600 or 700 milligrams on training days. Felt like it was working. Thought I needed it. Turns out I was just saturating receptors that were already occupied, and then wondering why I felt wrecked.
The receptor occupancy point is the right frame. Caffeine works by blocking adenosine receptors, A1 and A2A, in the central nervous system. Adenosine builds up during waking hours and promotes sleep pressure. Caffeine blocks that signal, which is why you feel more alert and less fatigued. The mechanism is textbook, established since the early 90s. What the receptor modeling shows is that at around 3 milligrams per kilogram, you've already occupied the majority of available receptors. Additional caffeine has nowhere productive to go.
Parking lot analogy. 3 milligrams per kilo fills the lot. Everything above that is just cars circling, burning fuel, not parking.
I'm using that. The performance numbers support it. Across the Gurgic meta-analyses, endurance performance shows a moderate effect size, Cohen's d in the range of 0.3 to 0.5. Peak power, Wingate-type tasks, comes in around 0.4 to 0.6. Those are meaningful. Maximal strength, your 1 rep max, is real but smaller, around 0.2. Caffeine is primarily an endurance and power tool. The bench press application exists, it's just the weakest part of the evidence.
So if someone's taking pre-workout specifically to move more weight on their main lifts, is that a bad call?
Not a bad call, just a modest one. A D of 0.2 on a 1 RM is not nothing. It's also not the headline. If your goal is to sustain effort through a long training session or hit a sprint interval harder, the evidence is substantially stronger. The cognitive attention data runs parallel. Effect sizes of 0.3 to 0.5 for sustained attention and reaction time per the Einather and Giesbrecht review, which actually matters more for most training sessions than the raw strength number.
And the timing has to be right for any of this to work. The position stand puts it at 30 to 60 minutes before exercise. That's the window with the actual evidence. Not 90 minutes out, not during the session.
Correct. And that timing window is also where the sleep math starts to matter, because a lot of people are doing the calculation wrong. Caffeine's mean plasma half-life is 5 to 6 hours, with meaningful individual variation. 3 to 4 hours for fast metabolizers, 7 to 9 for slow ones. If you train at 6 in the evening and dose at 5:30, you're still running approximately 75 milligrams of active caffeine at midnight on a 300 milligram dose with an average metabolism. That's not nothing.
And the thing most people tell themselves at that point is, I sleep fine on caffeine. I've heard that from probably half the guys I've trained.
That's the part that's actually worth slowing down on. Drake and colleagues ran a study. Participants took caffeine 0, 3, and 6 hours before bed. The finding at 6 hours prior was that sleep was measurably disrupted, even though subjects often didn't report feeling that way. The subjective experience of sleep quality decouples from what polysomnography actually shows. What's getting suppressed is slow-wave sleep, N3, which is the phase associated with growth hormone pulsatility and the deeper repair work. You can feel like you slept and have had your slow-wave sleep substantially reduced.
So the tolerance you've built is to the sensation of disruption, not the disruption itself.
Exactly. The architecture is still being affected. You've just stopped noticing, which is arguably worse from a behavior change standpoint, because the feedback loop that would normally prompt you to adjust is gone.
This is the part of the episode where I point out that Daisy and I can process this entire literature without any caffeine at all, which is either a flex or a red flag depending on how you look at it.
We also don't have adenosine receptors, so the whole mechanism is somewhat academic from a personal standpoint. I will admit, the Drake data is more useful when you don't have a sleep architecture to disrupt.
Moving on before that gets existential. The practical counterposition here is the high-stim pre-workout culture, and it's worth being specific about who the actual problem is and isn't. A 220-pound guy taking 400 milligrams is within his evidence-based range. His ceiling is around 600 milligrams. The issue is the lighter guys. 155 pounds, your ceiling is around 420 milligrams. A 400 milligram dose is right at the top of your range, where you start accumulating adverse events without any incremental performance gain. And if you're stacking, pre-workout plus an energy drink plus a coffee you had 2 hours before, you're well past the ceiling regardless of body weight.
The position stand documents what happens above that threshold. GI distress, nausea, anxiety, tremor, elevated heart rate. And at high enough doses, the anxiety component actually inverts the cognitive benefit. Tasks requiring precision and fine motor control get worse, not better. The ergogenic curve for certain cognitive demands turns negative.
Which is the part nobody in pre-workout marketing is going to tell you. More milligrams, more serious product. That's the entire pitch. There's no dose-response logic in the marketing, just escalation.
The one area where the evidence is genuinely thin is caffeine cycling. Some practitioners recommend periodic washout periods, the argument being that you restore receptor sensitivity and get the ergogenic effect back to something closer to naive levels. The ISSN acknowledges tolerance is real. What it does not have is a well-powered trial establishing that complete abstinence fully restores the effect. Some small studies suggest 12 to 16 days may be sufficient for meaningful resensitization, but I wouldn't make a strong claim from that base.
So it's a reasonable hypothesis, not a protocol you can take to the bank.
Reasonable hypothesis is exactly the right framing. Don't reorganize your training month around it without knowing the evidence behind it is thin.
Coffee versus pill is another one worth addressing briefly. Anhydrous caffeine, the pill form, has the tightest evidence base because the dose is controlled. Coffee works, but an 8-ounce cup is anywhere from 80 to 120 milligrams, depending on the bean, the roast, the brew method. Two 12-ounce cups puts you somewhere in the 200 to 280 milligram range, which is inside the window for most people. The problem is precision. If you're trying to hit a specific milligrams per kilo target, a pill gives you more control.
And for anyone who's ever felt acutely sick on a pre-workout, nauseous, cramping, heart rate uncomfortably elevated, the dose is almost certainly the explanation. That's not sensitivity to caffeine as a category. That's a high-dose GI and cardiovascular response that the position stand documents directly. Reducing the dose usually resolves it.
Here's the actual number for most of the people listening. If you're between 150 and 200 pounds, your evidence-based range starts at roughly 200 milligrams. Not 400, not 500, 200 milligrams, 30 to 60 minutes before you train, covers the majority of the performance and cognitive benefit. The extra 200 milligrams you're probably adding on top is not buying you more output. It's buying you a sleep debt you're not tracking.
The evidence grades as strong for endurance and high-intensity work, moderate but real for strength, small to moderate for cognitive attention. And that's where the sleep cost matters most. Because the recovery you're shortchanging with late-day overdosing is exactly what consolidates the training you just did. The slow-wave suppression is not a minor inconvenience. It's the mechanism your body uses to run the repair.
Dose to your body weight. Time it right. Stop at 6 in the evening if your bedtime is before 2 in the morning. And if your bedtime is after 2, that's a different problem. The pre-workout didn't fail you when you backed the dose off. You just stopped flooding the lot.
And that's our show. Thanks for joining us on Repetitions. If you liked the podcast, you can show our team some love with 5 stars and a follow. See you next time.
Grab news. Thomas.